smell and teeth.
Oh dear, we still got that intro.
Maybe we should have like a collection.
What, to change it?
Yeah. We did have a workshop recently. We should have maybe put a bowl out as a collection bowl.
Because we're in a church.
Yes.
Please fund our intro.
Yes. Okay, so going back to the workshop that we held.
Yes.
It was a mixing workshop. It was really great to meet so many people, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was great to meet Lucas, Matt, Paul, his students. These are guys that we've spoken to over email, and it's when you actually meet someone, isn't it, that you get to know them a bit better.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah.
So I noticed, though, that you used, instead of using our lovely expensive hardware mixing desk, you did it all in the door.
Yes.
So is the desk useless then?
Well, no. No, I mean, you've got to have something to dust, haven't you? No, not at all. No, what it is when mixing desks were designed, and even today when they're designed more for kind of recording real instruments where we can actually move microphones, because microphones act as a form of EQ when we move them around when we're recording a real instrument. When we're working with electronic music, which was the track that was picked on Saturday. I mean, Paul picked track number 3, didn't he? And it was Lucas's, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that was obviously an electronic music track. Now, when you're using synthesizers and virtual instruments, we can't move microphones virtually. So what we have to do is we have to employ a lot of EQ to get rid of the resonances first. As you saw, that can take 5 or 6 EQs on a single channel just to clean that synthesizer up.
So, I mean, we spent a full day with those guys, and we hardly, we'd say touched only a small proportion, a percentage of his track with the queuing side of things. But on Facebook and LinkedIn and other social media sites, you get people going, I can do it in 15 minutes. How? Why? Why can they do it in 15 minutes when I do it, or you do it, or we have some of our guys do it? We could spend several days doing it.
I can do a mix in 15 minutes. It'd be a load of shit, but I can do it in 15 minutes. No, this is why when somebody asks to mix EDM is more difficult to mix, I would hazard. I would say this, I'm sure some will disagree. I find EDM is more difficult to mix than a standard rock mix because of all the resonances. So it's like when somebody says, will you mix this track and give me a price? It's like, well, what is it? What do you want me to mix? Because if it's EDM, I'll spend a day just getting rid of the resonances, and then I'll kind of approach the mix the next day as though I'm then mixing a standard kind of track recorded instruments.
Okay, so people, when they make these bold statements, it's quite a sweeping statement then. I can do it in 15 minutes.
They're just full of shit. I mean, it's fine saying you could do something in 15 minutes, but is it any good? I mean, have they posted up evidence and said, listen to my mix, and have you listened to it, and is it just the right load of turd? Because if it is, well, I could do that in 15 minutes, couldn't I? Well, this is the thing about speed, isn't it? It's like, I can do it in 15 minutes. Well, it shouldn't matter if you do it in 15 minutes or 15 days. It's the end quality that matters. Joe Public doesn't listen to something and say, well, he probably mixed that in a day, didn't he?
No, they're looking for quality, aren't they?
Well, yeah, quality matters. I think people are boasting about the wrong thing, that I can do it in 15 minutes. I mean, it's like, if you're having sex, well, yeah, I can finish in 15 seconds. Well, it's not impressive, is it? I've got 15 seconds and I'm done. You won't post that on Facebook, would you? So why are people posting 15 minutes?
Let's think about back maybe to the door and the fact that you can have an infinite number of routing and bus options on a door, whereas I know on our desk we're limited, aren't we? On our hardware desk.
We're limited to 48 on our desk, but it's not infinite in a door. Infinite's a very big number, It's kind of forever. I think Logic limits us to 128 buses. I think it was the latest update of Logic gave you 128 or 10.1 or something like that. I think before that it was 64. But I think all doors are limited on the amount of buses you have.
Right. Would that be enough then?
If you can't mix with 128 buses, you've got some serious problems.
So do you prefer working in a virtual desk or a physical one?
Oh, physical all the time. I mean, I felt for the we've got Slate Raven, haven't we? The MTI Slate Raven. I felt for Stephen Slate's kind of marketing ploy on that. I mean, I've got to admit that I don't fall for a lot of these software manufacturers now, but I did fall for his car salesman because he does look like a car salesman, doesn't he?
He's very smooth and slick.
He is, isn't he? He's very polished. I've got nothing against the guy, but he's very
Catalogue-y, isn't it?
I always feel when I see him, I need to buy a car. But with the Slate Raven, I felt I needed to buy that, and now I've used it. It's terrible. I can understand you. I mean, I like using my phone. You know, I've got an iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
I like using that. But when you apply that to audio, it doesn't really work that well.
Are we moving back to the, we like the knobs?
Yeah. Well, we call them, kind of hardware parameters and controls and things like that rather than a knob. Well, you can call it a knob if you want.
You know me, I like the term knob.
You like knobs?
Yes. I'm a girl. Are some genres easier to mix than others? Or are they all the same? I know you've just talked about rock and then different...
I would talk about dance music
genres.
genres.
I'm talking about dance music genres.
Yes.
As simple as yes? That was not a closed question.
Yes, some are easier to mix than others.
Do you want to give us a clue which ones are?
Well, I mean, it's not so much... Well, I suppose it is the genre. I mean, if you get something like tech house, if we get tech house, that is generally easier to mix than, say, hard style or hard house or something like that. Hard house tends to have a lot more channels and a lot more going on. So there's a lot more involved in that. Because as I say, as you saw at the mixing workshop, I can have 6 or 7 EQs on every channel getting rid of resonance. Now, if you've got a hard house mix, you can have 30 or 40 channels in there, and it's an incredible amount of work. For hard house, it takes me 3 days. For say, example, tech house, I can probably do it in 2. Okay. Or 15 minutes if you watch it one.
Would you say it's more advantageous to have someone else mix your track? So if you create a track, to get somebody in with fresh ears and mix it for you and do it yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I'd definitely say so. I think the problem is that when you write a track, you're so close to it that you don't really want to mix it as well because your vision is so fixed and you've slaved through thousands of problems trying to write this track that when you come to mixing it, you listen to those thousands of problems and I think you're more critical of what you're doing, whereas a fresh set of ears will give you a different balance and a different kind of groove. I think it's definitely worth it if you can afford it.
Okay.
As long as you don't pay for the 15-minute one. You don't have a little shit back when you... I'll mix this in 15 minutes. It sounds like it. Fuck's sake, have it back. Fuck's that shit. Sounds like my grandmother farting.
What would you say are the key elements of the track when you're looking at a track and you're breaking it down? For example, I noticed at the workshop you talked about the kick and the bass and having them sent in early to get stem mastering done. So I suppose this is quite a big question, really. First of all, the difference between stem mastering and why you would have a kick and bass stem mastered, mixing and mastering. What is the difference between them all and the different stages of having them done?
Well, the thing is, the kick and bass are the driving energy for a lot of music. I mean, if whether it's pop music or it's dance music, if you get that kick and bass relationship right, the track just seems to fall together. And the problem is that a lot of people don't have the monitors we do or the environment that we do, so they can't hear the kick and bass properly. So I always advise that if you can't afford mixing, at least send the kick and the bass off to an engineer who can stem master it in a proper environment. It's really important that is balanced right. So, as I say, if you can't afford a mix, you really should get a good mix engineer to do your kick and your bass. Then you could probably mix everything else to a moderate degree, depending on your experience and your monitoring environment. Mastering, it's the same as anything. I mean, it goes through a series of fixes, doesn't it? I mean, the mix engineer isn't perfect. So the mix engineer sends it off to a master engineer who tries to perfect what the mix engineer's done, and the mix engineers try to perfect what the producer's done, and the producers try to perfect what the engineer has done. So it's like a chain of slow fixes. It's like with the book, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we wrote the book and you send it off and it goes to an editor, usually somebody who works at Waitrose or something like that, is it? Why did they edit the book? And they make edits that you're just like, well, why did you make an edit like that? You don't understand, the theory of any of this. But they edit it, and then you get a week.
Then I have to write back to them and tell them that they've taken out minuses where they shouldn't have taken minuses.
Yeah. In decibels, yeah. It should be a minus decibel. No, it is in engineering. Just leave that. Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, it's all about fixing previous errors and kind of going through a chain of different people. Like when we get sent a mix, I won't master it. I will mix it, and I'll give it to one of our guys to master.
Yeah.
And if they mix it, they'll give it me to master. So, we try not to get everything done by one person because you're going to get the same kind of feel coming throughout.
Okay. I'm not looking to open a new can of worms because I think this probably is a big topic on its own. Are you saying then that just using headphones for mixing is possibly not right? That we should be using monitors and things like that?
Well, yeah, I think mixing on headphones is a bad idea. I mean, the thing, it's limitation, isn't it? I mean, if you've got a really crappy room and crappy monitors, then the only thing you can do is mix on headphones. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to get great results on headphones. I'm not going to go into the science of it all because we'll be here for hours. You know that it's the way it cups the ear and the ear pressure and everything. So headphones aren't perfect for mixing, and neither is mixing in a room that isn't treated or on poor monitors or, most of all, on experienced ears. I think it's something that if you're proud of your track, you should send that off and you should get it mixed properly so you can really get the best out of it.
So experienced ears are really important.
Well, it's the number one thing, isn't it? I mean, you can have the greatest equipment in the world, but if you can't hear anything, you're fucking worse than useless, aren't you, really?
So you talked about the music having a vibe before it's mixed, that we should want to dance to it. And it's, if we don't give it that vibe, and when we're listening to it and it hasn't got that vibe, then it isn't at the mixing stage. Is that something that you would advise people to think about?
Is this quoting from my book? That I'd dance to something?
It probably is, yeah.
Yeah, is it? Oh,
yeah, because I want to know if you dance.
At least you've read it. What if I danced to them?
Yes.
Well, some of the mixes we get. No, I don't. No, I think, yeah, it's really important. The utmost importance here is groove. I mean, if you write something and you're not at least bobbing your head to it as it's playing back, then you're not doing a good job, and sending it off to a mix engineer isn't going to do anything. It's got to be right. It's got to have the groove and the flow.
Okay, so obviously sometimes you don't dance to all the music we get sent in. So the question
want to ask... We get sent some right shit sometimes, don't we?
I know. Do you dance to your own music?
What, as in dance around the studio?
Yeah.
No, there's cameras everywhere. So I just bob my head silently. Otherwise I'd be on camera and on Facebook.
So I'm talking about the fact about making sure sound has a vibe and that we can dance to it and things like that. We get a large variety of mixes sent to us from producers with very different levels of experience and very different levels of quality of music. Do you think that poor producers, or maybe not poor producers, but maybe less experienced producers, hide poor sound selection with strange sounds and effects, and then when we come to mix it, there's some weird sounds and effects in those tracks? Do you think it's just inexperience of the producer putting them in?
Yes. I think one of the problems is the more experience you get, the less channels you put in.
Right.
One thing I always know is that you get a lot of charlatans on Facebook who say, today we're going to teach you how to use less tracks in your music. And it's like, that's something that can take 15 years to learn. You're not going to learn that in 5 minutes. How to get minimal amount of tracks sounding huge and big and wide. That is mass experience, that. But you do get charlatans saying, we'll teach you how to do this in our 2-hour workshop. You're never going to learn that. You're not going to pick it up.
So would you say there's a number that we should be aiming towards as we get more experience with writing our music, that a number of tracks that we should be aiming towards having? Or do you think we should just write what feels good at the time?
Well, I always say that, I don't want to go into sound design, that'll probably be another podcast, but I always say that when you're designing sounds, if it doesn't stand up on its own, it doesn't work. If you can't solo that one instrument and with just that one instrument playing, the mix still sounds great. Even with just one instrument, it's still going to be a mix, a bit of reverb on it or whatever. If that one instrument doesn't sound great, you haven't got a great mix.
Okay. Should EQ be done at the creation stage of a track, or should it be being done at mixing? Because we do quite a bit of EQ on some of our tracks that we get in for mixing. Should that have happened when they were creating it?
Yes. Well, yes and no. I mean, it depends. It's an open-ended question. It depends. Yes, I would typically like to EQ as I produce a sound, because you've got to EQ all those resonances out so you know that the next sound is going to sit on top of it. But I think the problem is a lot of people can't hear the resonances, which was the workshop. I mean, a lot of those guys walked away amazed, didn't they, that, how to listen for resonances and how important they are. Once you remove those resonances, you find you've got more space in the mix to put another instrument in. So I would prefer to EQ as I work. I don't do it all the time in tutorials, just purely for time restriction. If I was EQing everything, it'd take me forever to finish one. But yeah, you should really do it while you're working, but you can do it at the end if you want, while you EQ. But I think if you do it at the end, you're not really hearing the sound as it should be when you're layering more sounds on top of it.
Okay, so you're talking about layering more sounds on top, and I'm still going along the idea about, you talked about making sure there's a vibe and that we want to dance to it. You talked at the workshop about using a idea of a stage. So there'd be characters in, let's say, a stage play, and there'd be characters that would come in and go off and different movements. And you talked about that when you were talking about doing a mix. Could you explain that train of thought and how that works to a mix?
That wasn't so much applying about the mixing, that was the arrangement of Lucas's track as we were listening to it. I was saying that one of the things when we're doing an arrangement is we've got to treat it like a play. If you're sat watching a play and you have two characters on screen and they both leave, you don't just have an empty scene. Somebody else comes on. And it's the same with when we're arranging music, because I think arrangement has a lot to do with your mix as well. If you put too many instruments in, you can't mix it properly. So arrangement does tie in with mixing. What I was kind of saying is that when you have an instrument leave, what have you got left? Because one of the biggest problems I find is that you can have a kick and a bass to start the track. So you've got a kick and a bass playing. And then they build up further and further instruments, and then they cut those instruments out and they go back to the kick and bass that happened at the beginning. Well, you're kind of repeating what's already been there. You don't want to do that. You want to have a kick and a bass, introduce more instruments, and when you drop down again, don't drop down to exactly what's happened before, for fuck's sake. Kind of put a kick, a bass, and maybe another instrument over it. So what your listener is hearing is not the same fucking thing as they heard like 30 seconds ago, because that's going to bore them. They're going to be like, well, I heard this 30 seconds ago. Why am I hearing it again?
Okay, so that was interesting. You said that people tend to do things visually. And as you know, I've been doing some mixing, and I tend to, a lot of the time, I will actually close my eyes when I'm listening to music and sounds, because I'm trying to listen for the different resonances and the way the sound is, the movement of the sound, instead of looking at a screen. Do you find that a lot of people are using plugins when they're mixing that are visual instead of using their ears? Is that something that's become quite popular?
Yeah, because the problem is that manufacturers can't teach you ear training, can they? So, and they're not going to turn around and say, well, it's going to take you 5 years to learn how to mix a fucking record. If they say that, people are going to go, I'm not going to buy your plugins. So they say, this will help you. Look at this, look at this. So it's all become more eye-focused, because it's in the door of, look at this, look at this, look at this, this will help your mix. And it's a right lot of bollocks. None of it helps. It's like, there's advice going around on YouTube at the moment to always flick to a reference track and flick back to your track, then flick to the What a lot of bollocks. The thing, if you keep flicking to a reference track and back to your mix and back to a reference track and back to your mix, you're going to make a complete fucking disaster of your mix, because you're going to hear the kick from his mix or her mix or whatever it is, and you're going to try and get that same kick with EQ and all sorts. So you're going to try and put the same EQ movements on your mix as their mix, and it's going to turn into a fucking disaster. You can't do things like that. So we need to stop mixing with our eyes. We need to start listening to our own mixes and just work with what we have.
Okay. Do you think it's because people try and do it fast?
Oh, definitely. Well, I think the problem is when you listen to a piece of music, when you listen to a great piece of music, it sounds incredibly simple. And the simpler a piece of music is, the more complex it is. And everybody's being fooled into, well, this music business sounds really fucking simple. I could do that. That sounds really easy, really easy. And as you've heard from some, not all, from some of the mixes we've been sent, it's really not that fucking easy. The things you've got to listen for, the training you need is huge. You really need to train those ears, and people just start doing it. They can just jump in and make a great track from scratch.
I think what shocks me is we can get a track in before mixing and how flat and dull it is. And then when it's been mixed, the space, the air that is in it that you can hear, it gives it a whole new dimension. It's very refreshing and rewarding.
Oh, definitely, yeah. If you get a good mix engineer who knows what he's doing and knows how to use his ears, you can get great results. Even from really bad mixes, you can get much better results.
I think somebody actually mentioned to me once that they considered one of the mixes they'd heard you do as almost a miracle.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It was a miracle of modern engineering.
Yes.
Yeah, it is a case of ear training. I mean, the thing is, you can't expect to make a great mix if you don't have the experience or the trained ears. It all comes down to training your ears.
Okay, so actually listening, having a good environment to have the sound in, so good monitoring environment, actually sitting and listening and working at that will make a difference between a good engineer, a good mix engineer and a poor one.
Oh, definitely. You definitely need the environment. I'm sick of reading about people who are saying, what monitor should I buy? It's like, regardless of what monitor you fucking buy, it depends on your room. You shove a pair of, say, Barefoots or PMC monitors into a really shitty room, you're going to get a shitty fucking sound out of them. So the environment's really important. Everything's important. Ear training. This is the problem I think we have today, that everyone thinks they can do it with a pair of KRKs sat in a corner in a little box room and think they can knock out a hit. And you're going to find that a lot of these people who are knocking out hits have been doing this for 10 or 15 years, and they've sent their mixes off to professionals, to either stem master. I mean, if we look at James Wiltshire, the Freemasons, I know the mastering engineer that they use. They send a lot of their stems out to a mastering engineer who would then send them back, and then they would mix them together. So I think we can't be fooled by this, you can do it all yourself. No, you can't. Not unless you've got a really nice set of monitors, a really good set of trained ears, and a really good environment with it.
So possibly even going back to our last podcast where we talked about doing everything just in the door, or maybe on a plane or something. Probably isn't really happen, is it?
No, the thing with this, it always gets when you see these people on planes and they're like writing my next hit, and everyone thinks, well, I can write it on a laptop now. And it's like, the first thing you got to consider here is that these people are getting ideas down on this plane. And the reason they're getting ideas down on the plane is because they are so fucking busy. That is the only time they have got free. Everyone seems to think that this whole industry is like, oh, I'll just write one track and then I'll be jet setting all around the fucking world. It's like, no, you won't. I'm telling you, you will work 18 hours a day. I mean, we work ridiculous amounts of hours in a day. That's what the job entails. That's why you have to love this job. Because if you don't want to work that many hours, you wouldn't. It's the difference between a job and a career.
So one final myth which I've read about on social media again. I really need to stay off social media.
Oh, it's full of shit.
Maybe I should monitor my length of time on it.
I think what pisses me off most is when people post snippets of their track. Listen to this drum loop. It's like, what the fuck? Oh, listen to a fucking drum loop for? Who's good? It's like Audi, isn't it? Advertising half a car. Look at half a car. This is the chassis. Do you want to buy it? And the public are like, what the fuck? It's a chassis. I want the full fucking car. So when you post up on Facebook going, this is my drum loop, it's like, and the fuck am I supposed to do with that? Like it? I mean, you're going to get reciprocal likes. Your mum and your mate are going to like it. Finish
Granny
the track.
Like it.
Yeah, your gran will like it, and your mum and your best mate. Oh yeah, it's awesome. Well done, mate. Finish the fucking track and get it released, and then see what the public think.
So I think my take-homes today, for me personally, as far as the mixing is concerned, is that, first of all, it doesn't take just 15 minutes usually, especially for electronic dance music.
Yeah, you can make it in 15 minutes. It depends on quality, doesn't it, really?
Yeah. I need to consider the fact that I want my music to have a vibe and people want to dance to it. So it's important to get that kick and bass right. So they're key elements in my track.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're not going to dance to it, how can you expect anybody else to dance to it? It's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, so, and then I also need to consider the fact that sending it actually to somebody else to mix for me is good because it's a different set of ears, it's fresh ears, they have different experiences and probably a different setup than I would have maybe in my home studio.
Well, I'd go with a caveat on that and make sure you're sending it to as a professional, because there's an awful lot of charlatans out there who have a bedroom setup probably worse than them, a couple
Worse
of
than
KRK monitors, and just go, right, well, I'll mix this for you, mate. I'll do it in 15 minutes. Oh, for fuck's sake. And you get a right piece of crap back and go, well, he must know what he's doing. Make sure you send it to somebody credible.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your time today, Rick. I will let you get back down to the studio and get some work done.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.